So this happened about a year ago. I know it because it was around Valentine's Day and I'd spend the week leading up to it just dreading it. Stalking my ex on Instagram and generally just felt pretty terrible about myself. We'd split up a few months earlier and she kept the flat we'd lived in, seeing as she did most of the work finding it. Her friend moved in and I moved out. It was a simple but painful arrangement. I ended up finding a flat for myself way out, on pretty much the outskirts of the city. I don't know if you've ever been to London, but flat prices are stupidly high, and if you want anywhere that's more than just a bed and a toilet, you have to abandon any hope of living remotely central. So the Valentine's Day season came around, and one weekend I was feeling fairly sorry for myself, working my way through a bottle of Prosecco. I should have really been sharing when I made the decision. I changed the radius on all my dating apps to be as small as possible and tried to see if I could get a Valentine's date lined up. Half the time you matched with someone and they'd reveal that they were on the other side of London to you, and your attempt to organize a drink would fall through. "It's too far," or "I don't have time tonight, maybe next week," were phrases you'd hear all the time. So I'm not the most attractive guy. I think I'm honest enough with myself to say that, and I have a pretty good gauge of when someone I've matched with seems too hot to be real. Usually my hunches confirm when they send me a message advertising some Russian dating site in the first minute. Anyway, I meet Becca, who seems lovely, and very much in my league, and who lives actually not too far from me. We agree to go for a drink at the Crown the day before Valentine's Day, so as not to have the awkward expectation of anything extra romantic, which is pretty much the local for anyone who lives near my overground stop, and I'm pretty excited to be honest. She seems pretty funny. Maybe not wife material, but we get along, and for a while the thought of my ex off on her own Valentine's Day seems a lot less unpleasant. So, date night comes, and I have my usual beer or two before for a bit of Dutch courage and head off to the Crown. I send her a message to let her know that I'm on the way, and she says cool, she's almost there. It's a little dark out, and there's a thin mist of rain, but I shrug it off. It is London, after all. The walk to the pub doesn't usually take too long. You have to navigate loads of little back streets that ends up slowing you down a whole bunch, and I spend a little extra time to avoid some alleyways, just because I've heard stories about people getting mugged around here. But I arrive to the Crown only a bit late, and send her a message apologizing as I get in. She replies pretty quickly. Instantly, almost. "Shoot," she says. "Didn't get a chance to message you. There's a bunch of guys in there for someone's birthday, and they're being really rowdy, making me a little uncomfortable. I've nipped over to a restaurant down the road to see if they might have space for us." I mean, she's not wrong. There are a bunch of guys in here being loud and obnoxious, and I guess if you were a small woman, it would make you pretty uncomfortable. Not only that, but a group are smoking outside and jeering, and I could see how you wouldn't want to hang around outside for long. She sends me the restaurant's name and tells me to hurry. They'll save a table for us if I'm quick. This is where I get a little concerned. We never agreed to dinner. Not only that, but when I put in Google Maps, the location gives me 2 routes. One is pretty quick, and the other adds an extra 10 minutes onto your walk time, easy. The only issue is the shorter route goes right through this old estate that's semi-abandoned. I say semi because although I'm sure people live there, I'm not sure who, and half the buildings are boarded up. I take one look at it and decide that there's no way I'm going through there. There are barely any streetlights, if any, and I can barely make out much more than a few dark shapes. I decide to take the longer way around and apologize to her, but let her know that I'll be a little later. She replies instantly again and tells me that I need to come now and that I should just be as quick as possible. I don't like her tone and tell her there's no way I'm walking through the old estate at night. Now I'm beginning to feel really uncomfortable and am aware of how alone I am on this route. Whilst it passes by several houses and shops, there's no one actually on the street itself. There aren't many people out on the night before Valentine's Day, and come to think of it, I've got no idea why the restaurant would be so full in the first place. I get that funny feeling in my stomach where you know something's wrong but can't quite put your finger on it. And for some reason, I walk in the middle of the road for the last stretch. I think maybe I felt a little safer there, or at least in my head I think I'd be able to see anyone who came towards me. Thankfully, no one did. I did manage to freak myself out a little, catching my reflection in shop fronts and car windows, and have to make a conscious effort to not look at them because I know I'll only freak myself out more. I'd have turned right around, but I realized that I was actually closer to the restaurant than the original pub, and at this point I just wanted to see another friendly human face. I sped up my walking slightly, made sure to text a couple of friends just to be safe. All this time I'm walking, she's messaging me telling me just to hurry up and that the shortcut's fine, she literally just took it. But as soon as I mention I'm almost at the restaurant, she stops replying, just like that. One moment she's telling me to hurry, and the next, as soon as it's clear I'm not going to use the shortcut at all, she's gone. Well, they're gone, I suppose. No way of knowing who it was. I get inside, and like I suspected, the place is fairly empty. It's definitely not booked out, and when I ask if the waiter's seen any woman like Becca asking about a table, he shakes his head. Not tonight, he tells me. Only a couple of families and an older couple. I think about texting whoever was claiming to be Becca, but even opening the conversation gives me the creeps. The idea that there's a couple of days' worth of chatting there, of whomever was on the other end pretending for whatever reason to be a normal person, gives me the chills. It's strangely weirder to think of someone that creepy pretending to be normal in a weird way. I think about walking back using the road, but I realize, looking out the window of the restaurant, that whoever was pretending to be Becca knows my exact location. They'll know I arrived and found out they were lying. I think about the fact that they might be watching me from somewhere, my silhouette in the window, and I ask if I can have a table whilst I order an Uber home. Even during the ride home, I hate the idea of my face near the window, and I try to lean into the middle seat. I get the driver to drop me as close as possible to my house, and my heart races the whole walk home. I never told them my address exactly, but the idea that they know the area I live in is enough to make me start looking at flats on the other side of the city. I think, as soon as I can, I'm going to move. It all started on the 7th of February. The small independent coffee shop I was working at had decided to throw up a few decorations for Valentine's Day. So myself and a few colleagues had spent pretty much our entire shift putting up pink and red bunting, writing romantic quotations around the edges of our blackboard menu, and other romantically themed stuff. It was a fun way to spend a shift, but as I clocked out and began the short walk back to my flat, I began to feel a slight pang of loneliness, knowing I'd be single and alone on the day itself. I consider Tinder or Bumble to try and bag myself a date, but the chances of securing myself a boy that I actually genuinely liked over the next 7 days was slim to none, so I resigned myself to another Valentine's on my own. But when I got home to find a pink envelope in my mailbox, I must admit that it brought a little smile to my face. A secret admirer, like something right out of a cheap romance paperback, might not be every girl's cup of tea. But to be honest, it really cheered me up, even if it was from a friend or the nice lady that lived on the ground floor flat. Only when I open the thing up, it just says, 7 days to go. No romantic message, no kisses or hearts, just those 3 words scrawled hastily onto the paper inside. It's then I realized there's nothing on the envelope or the paper it contained that confirmed it was actually addressed to me. No name, no address, nothing. I started to feel a tad silly, like, what if it wasn't meant for me at all? What if someone had sent their little Valentine's card to the wrong person? I told myself I was just being silly, but kept the envelope and card as I walked upstairs to my flat and got on with my evening. I honestly think I'd forgotten the whole thing by the next morning when I got up and set off to work again. But when I got home, there was a stark reminder that this was no mistake. Arriving back at my flat, I checked my mail, to find yet another pink envelope inside. Not only that, but a small brown paper package was stuffed inside too. Again, I have to admit to being kind of excited about the whole thing. There definitely hadn't been a mistake of address or anything. I mean, the person must have had to put all that stuff in there themselves. Maybe I really did have a secret admirer, and that Valentines was about to become something out of a fairy tale. But as soon as I opened the package, I knew something wasn't quite right. Inside was a small brown teddy bear. Only it wasn't newly bought, nor had it been looked after very well in what was obviously a long and grubby existence. To be frank, it was filthy. The thing looked like it hadn't been washed in years, decades even. The fur was all grimy and matted together, and one of its glasses was missing, probably having been pulled out by a child some years before. The note inside the envelope was pretty much the same as the last one, only this time it read, 6 days to go. That's about the time that I realized that whoever was sending these wasn't exactly all there, and what had previously been a kind of giddy excitement turned into nervous anticipation. And the more I let my mind dwell on it, the more and more frightened I became. This wasn't going to be some dream romance. In fact, it was more likely to be the polar opposite. I told a friend in work about the whole thing, and they seemed to take it much more seriously than I had. They told me I obviously had a stalker, that even if this person was doing this stuff out of affection, it was still crossing a number of personal boundaries, and I should consider contacting the police. But to tell them exactly what? That I had a note addressed to no one, from no one, with absolutely no other details than I'd found them in my mailbox. Alright, it wasn't exactly the dream romantic gestures that I think all girls kind of crave, but at the same time, why cause someone the distress of calling the cops on them? That felt kind of cruel. But after returning home that evening to something else in my apartment, I didn't feel so apprehensive about contacting them. I arrived home again that evening to find exactly what I expected in my mailbox. Another note, this time reading, yep, you guessed it, 5 days to go. I stormed up to my apartment, grabbed a piece of notepaper and a Sharpie, and wrote out something along the lines of, "Whoever is leaving stuff in my mailbox, please stop. It was sweet at first, but now it's kind of creepy. No more, or I call the police." I made an effort not to come across as too rude or aggressive, but I also needed to make it clear that I really didn't appreciate their unwanted attention. I taped the note to the front entrance of my apartment building before I went to bed, hoping whoever it was would get the message and leave me alone. So, little side note, I get a shower before bed every night without fail. I'm almost sort of a clean freak. I keep my bathroom pretty much spotless. So as I finish getting washed, something small catches my eye. Something that might not even gain the attention of most people, but to me, it stuck out like a sore thumb. A flash of color in what is an otherwise pristine white bathroom. On the window's ledge was a tiny, glassy dome shape, just sat there on its own. I approached curiously, peering down at it for a few moments before I completely freaked out and ran out of the bathroom to call the cops. It was a small, glass eye, a minuscule amount of fabric woven into the back of it. I recognized it almost instantly as the missing eye from the teddy bear that I'd found in my mailbox. While I was on the phone to the police, I realized a few things about my prospective Valentine. As I said, I get a shower every evening before bed. I like hot showers, the steamier the better, so naturally the bathroom window spends a lot of time ajar to let out the moisture. Whoever managed to put that glass eye on the bathroom window ledge had known my evening routine. They had obviously been watching me for long enough to work out the exact place to put something so that I'd see it. But it was their method that really creeped me out. The way they used the small Teddy's eye to tell me in so many words that they were watching me. I swapped the note out I'd written for one that simply read, "The police have been contacted. Leave me alone." And leave me alone they did. But the whole thing had a pretty serious effect on my psyche for a long time afterwards. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at someone in the coffee shop or someone walking past my flat, wondering if it was them, if one day one of them would look over and smile, and I'd just know they'd not given up just yet. Since people have been posting a lot of Valentines-related stories recently, I thought I'd share a little story of my own. It's not nearly as scary as some of the others posted here about people sending each other animal hearts and whatnot. Not on the surface, anyway. But I guess what scared me so much was how a seemingly normal and pleasant situation could turn so horrible so fast. One minute you're commenting on how surreal or soap opera-ish something can be, but when you realize the real and present danger, it's too late. You're already staring it in the face. Some things or some people have a way of just creeping up on you, and this is how it happened to me. So about this time last year, I matched with a girl on Tinder who, like me, was looking for someone to spend Valentines with. We hit it off almost straight away, and it only took a week or so before we were hanging at each other's apartments, having little Netflix and Domino's dates, and generally sinking into the comfort of being a couple. We'd batted around the idea of making it official, but we both agreed that the less we focused on what we referred to as relationship red tape, the happier and comfier we were. This is possibly where we made the first mistake. So at one point, myself and the girl were talking about how annoying it is when guys hit on her while she's at work. She was working behind a bar at the time, some tiki place that had her wearing Hawaiian shirts as part of her uniform. She always looked super cute in them, which is why I couldn't really blame guys for hitting on her. I mean, I would. This one guy had apparently asked her if she had a boyfriend, to which she replied something along the lines of, "No, I'm dating, but nothing serious." Now I know this wasn't her trying to keep her options open, as I had been doing pretty much the same thing, shrugging off the questions all chill like I'm some kind of player. But it was all a front. We really did like each other. Anyways, we have that little conversation, do some venting, and then move on. I really didn't pay it any more thought. That wasn't until a few days later. The girl stays over at my house on the Sunday night, intending to go straight to work from my place. I get a text from an unknown number early in the afternoon, saying it's her using a coworker's phone to let me know she's left her own phone in my apartment. So being gentlemanly, I go drop it off, say hi, and arrange ourselves a little date for later on. Now I rode my bike down to the bar, just like I ride my bike everywhere. Not because I'm a green-fingered hippie from the Extinction Rebellion, more like I can't quite afford the payments on a decent car yet. But as I'm riding back to my apartment, I hear a car behind me start to honk its horn angrily. I assume it's because he wants me to let him pass, so I edge over to the side of the road and motion for him to go ahead. But he doesn't go ahead at all. The driver just keeps honking angrily at me, getting closer and closer until I'm actually pretty scared there's going to be an accident. I make the decision to mount the curb, just go get out of this idiot's way entirely. Only when I do, the guy slows to a stop, rolls down his window, and begins smiling at me from his seat. I ask him if there's a problem with my cycling, and he just doesn't reply, just keeps smiling as he rolls up his window and drives off. Now, this isn't exactly unusual for a number of reasons. Drivers just seem to hate cyclists in my city. I don't know if it's because traffic laws favor cyclists or whatever, but let's just say it's not the first time I've run afoul of some angry motorist while I've been cycling around town. So, as annoying as it was, I hadn't put two and two together at that point. A few days pass, and I'm doing some grocery shopping not too far from my apartment when I see a familiar face. Not just in passing either. Like two old acquaintances passing each other in a rush, I was being straight up stared at, eyeballed from down an aisle by someone I came to recognize as the crazy honker who was driving way too close behind me. I'm not one for public confrontation, so as much as I kinda wanted to at least give the guy a talking to, this was definitely not the place to do it. Besides, I'm not one to hold a grudge, at least I think so anyway. So I just tried to avoid eye contact, get my groceries, and get out of there. Only this guy seemed to have other plans. Every single aisle I walk down, he's either already there or appears shortly after, almost as if he was tracking or following me, which, as it turns out, was exactly what he was doing. I did a pretty good job of avoiding him, just picking up the essentials before making a beeline for the cashier and then the door. But just as I was about to mount my bike and take off, I heard someone jogging to catch up with me. It was the guy. I don't remember exactly what was said between us. My heart was pounding by the time I rode away, but I'll try to paraphrase as best as I can. "You're the guy who likes honking his horn, right? Any reason you were following me around the supermarket today?" "Leave her alone." "Leave who alone?" "You know who I'm talking about, kid. Unless you're as dumb as you look." "I really don't, man, so please, fill me in." "We both know," and then he went on to name the girl I've been seeing, "wants nothing more to do with you. If I hear about you bothering her again, I'll kill you." "You threatening me? I don't think the cops would be too pleased about that." "It's not a threat. It's a promise. I followed you that day. I know where you live, where you work, where your parents sleep. Leave her alone, or I'll take everything from you. Everything." As I rode away, he actually called after me, called out the exact street address where my parents lived. A little side note, I went to visit them a day or two after the honking incident, so it was completely feasible that the guy had actually been following me, not just for a day or two, but like an entire freaking week. I talked to the girl I was seeing, and slowly we pieced together the picture of how this guy had asked her if she was single on one day, then had proceeded to follow her and then me, until he built up a detailed picture of our entire lives. Fortunately for us, nothing more came out of the guy's threats. We each spotted him around town a few more times, eyeballing us as we were out on dates, etc. But then he seemed to just drop off the map entirely. And thank God, too. Sometimes I think of how easy it would have been for that guy to just knock me off my bike and inflict life-changing injuries upon me. Or worse, do something to my parents.
I have submitted this story anonymously. The reason for doing so will become apparent to all who are listening. I have had my eye on this channel for quite some time, and I deliberately selected you to tell my story. I like your voice, and based on your past content, I think you'll give this story your undivided attention. If you're going to use my story for a video, do not change a word. I don't mind your audience thinking that I'm some kind of unhinged lunatic. Perhaps there's some truth to that, but I ultimately view myself as a result of a very unbalanced equation. I expect that this tale will not go over well with some folks. Allow me to respond to that by saying that I'm someone who truly does not care about the opinions of others. Most of you are naive and misguided, and sometimes even downright stupid. You can slap me with labels such as sociopath, an asshole, incel, whatever you wish. But if I were to smash through your bedroom window at night and rush you with a knife, would your little insults really matter then? I'm guessing not. Now for the setup. I grew up in a very unassuming suburban environment, with white picket fences and family barbecues. From a very young age, I was aware that I have always had a capacity for violence. At the drop of a hat, I would have no problem bludgeoning someone to death with a fire poker. Not that I've ever done such a thing, but you get the point. However, this affliction of mine was always methodical. It served a purpose. It was never beyond my control. There was a boy in middle school, we'll call him Kyle, who made the mistake of targeting me for his bullying antics, calling me disparaging names, throwing stuff at me, and even spitting on me during bus rides. I was only 14 at the time, but as soon as his saliva made contact with my skin for the first time, I began to plot my revenge. You see, Kyle happened to live in the same neighborhood as me, so finding out where he lived was a simple task. Most of the houses between mine and his were still under construction. I spent about a month staking out his place from a nearby hiding spot and observing the routine of Kyle's family. Kyle was an only child, and both of his parents worked long hours, which might explain why he was such an asshole. I figured out that on Friday nights, Kyle was left alone. He would almost always have a pizza delivered to his house around 8 o'clock and would always order from the same place. Kyle was a creature of habit. During all this time, he would continue to pick on me during bus rides, but I took it in stride because I knew what was coming his way. Everything about my plan seemed to line up quite nicely. You see, the front porch of Kyle's home was undergoing some kind of remodeling. The contractors that Kyle's parents hired were careless enough to leave behind a very large crowbar, lying on a bench right next to the front door. During one of my stakeouts, I swiped the object from the front porch before making my way back to my house, 2 streets over. I think you know where this is going. On one Friday night, I made my way back to Kyle's place and rang the doorbell at around 7:45. I stepped off to the side in case Kyle looked through the peephole. I was wearing a mask to conceal my identity, but I didn't want to be seen, because not even Kyle would be dumb enough to open a door with a masked person standing on the other side. Fortunately for me, Kyle opened the door and wasn't even paying attention to what was in front of him. He was looking at what I believed to be a Game Boy Color, which was very popular at the time. He stood in the doorway for a few moments, fiddling with the Game Boy, before finally looking up. I wonder what went through his mind as the metal handle of the bar smashed into his face. Kyle collapsed onto the floor, and I stood on the front porch and watched him as he flailed around, cupping his hands over his nose. I wish I would have had time to give him a couple more whacks, but I knew that the pizza man would show up any minute, and of course, Kyle's wails of pain would soon attract a neighbor, so I made my escape, darting between houses and making it back to my place without being seen by anyone. It was perfect. Of course, the community was in an uproar. Not even our children are safe! Oh no! The overweight police chief even made a few appearances on local television stations, vowing that he would do everything in his power to capture whoever did this horrible crime. They brought the entire school into the gym to explain to us that one of our classmates was violently attacked. But to be honest, nobody really gave a shit about Kyle. Kyle's nose had to be surgically reconstructed, and when he finally returned to school, he didn't seem to have any interest in picking on me or anyone else for that matter. Aside from seeing the occasional patrol car cruising around my neighborhood, not much changed. I wasn't planning on making an encore. Even at 14, I knew that luck had a lot to do with my plan playing out the way it did, and I was smart enough not to push it. No one even looked my way. I was never questioned by the police, and they never found out who viciously attacked Kyle. I have absolutely no regrets about what I did. Kyle got exactly what he deserved.
Back when I was living on the streets, well, technically in my car, I would always post up about fast food restaurants because people would always give me their change or some of the food that they had recently purchased. One day I posted at the entrance of a plaza, and in that plaza the busiest place was a Chick-fil-A. Throughout the day I received a few bucks and a lot of chicken nuggets. After being out there for a few hours, I noticed a car that left a few times and came back to park in the Chick-fil-A parking lot with covered license plates. But the person never got out of the car. Of course I thought it was weird, but I didn't think anything of it. Throughout the day, I'd take my food to my car and I'd eat. Around 8 p.m., most of the plaza was closing up, and the traffic started to slow down. Finally, when Chick-fil-A slowed down for a few minutes, a man in the car got out and he walked up to the door of the restaurant and took a picture of the inside. A few seconds later, what looked like the manager came outside, and it looked like she was arguing with the guy. She went back inside and the man got back in his car, got on his phone, and left about 5 minutes later. FYI, I was parked about 25 feet away from the Chick-fil-A parking lot and could see everything that was going on. So a few hours go by and the place was closed. From the outside, it looked as if the employees were cleaning up. I was trying to fall asleep, then I saw that car from earlier pull up. Then it woke me all the way up. There were 2 cars left in the parking lot. His car and some other car. And some people left. The only person I saw inside was the woman that he was talking to earlier. I saw the man get out of his car at this point. He was wearing dark colors and with gloves on. And I saw the lights get turned off inside of Chick-fil-A. The man was standing on the side of the building by a dumpster, but in a way where he can't be seen. He was in the shadows. At that point, I leaned my seat all the way back so no one could see me. The woman walked out, turned around, and began to lock the door. As soon as she turned around, that man sprinted toward her, yanked her hair, and started to yell at her as he took her back inside. I leaned up a little bit to get a better look, but I couldn't see anything. There was nothing for about 10 minutes, until the man walked back outside. He went straight to his car, but instead of driving away, he drove up to the door and went back in with his trunk left open. A few minutes later, I saw something that I would never forget. The man was dragging the woman's body, but there was no head. He struggled to get her in the trunk, but eventually he got her there. He went back in there and came out with a Chick-fil-A bag full of something and threw it in his trunk. He went back inside again for what seemed like 20 minutes. He came back out, locked up Chick-fil-A, and drove away. Someone else came back for the other car in the parking lot. A few days later, I went into a Starbucks to use the restroom, and on the news was a story about a missing woman. They showed the picture, and it was the woman who worked at Chick-fil-A. They were interviewing her husband, who was crying during the whole interview. What creeped me out is that her husband was the man that I saw with her that fateful night. I know he killed her, but he was on the news as if he didn't have anything to do with it, and like he doesn't know. Seeing that lady that night has haunted me since.